would like to welcome everyone to our webinar today. So
Let's
we're
get
talking about
started.
leveraging AI today and financial automation. Coming into this year, I'm not sure I would have thought we would do an AI kind of a webinar. And the number of times I've heard AI, chat GPT, things like that, it has been amazing how much that has just become part of our natural language. I was at an AI CPA conference back in May, and Barry Melanson, who's the CEO of the AI CPA, everyone AI, it's uncommon that it doesn't come up that is it going to take away jobs. And his comment I thought was interesting was AI won't replace accountants, but it will replace accountants who decide not to embrace AI. And I thought that was interesting that if we don't figure out something around how to do this, we're probably going to make ourselves obsolete in doing that. So I've got a couple of administrative things and some introductions to get into, and then we're going to jump right into our topic. So this is a CPE credit. We have 4 polling questions. We'll need people to answer at least 3 of those poll questions that we have. Having done that, we will send out the CPE certificates via email to people. You can't interact audio with us, but we do have the question function, and we really encourage people to use that question function. I will monitor those questions and make sure that Matt is hearing what those questions are. So we'll get as many things answered for people as we can. And I would hope we can make this as interactive doing it that way as possible. And then we will send out both the replay and a copy of the slides will be sent out via email here in the next week. Okay, you're seeing down the bottom of your screen that Summit Virtual CFO by Anders. So let me just tell you a little bit about the company that I work with. Back in 2002, we were started as a traditional accounting firm. Tax and audit was our specialty. Starting in 2004, we really started focusing on CFO and back office services. Up to 2013, that was what we were really doubling down and saying that is a service offering that we're going to really put our entire business around. At that time, we actually got rid of the office, went through a series of improving the office, had people leave, and many people said, hey, we want to try this remote thing. And so we did as a firm. So our clients and our employees are spread all across the United States, and some of our clients have locations outside the U.S. Last year, we joined Anders CPA and Advisors, a St. Louis-based accounting firm. So now we're thrilled, and we are the Summit Virtual CFO offering by Anders is where we are today, and we're thrilled about that. So what we're going to go over today, I'll do quick introductions of me and Matt, and then we're going to talk about what are the financial fundamentals that we're going to reinforce, and then how do you try to align technology with finance to avoid future adversity. How do you operate with confidence through automation? And then we'll talk about some takeaways that are in there. Okay. I do see a hand raise. If you just use the question function, that'll be the easiest for us to make sure that we get questions answered. I want to make sure I'm seeing what those questions are. Okay. Let me introduce myself. So I'm Tom Waddleton. I am a virtual CFO. As I mentioned, I work at Summit Virtual CFO by Anders. So I've got a group of 15 to 20 clients where I act as their business consultant and play the role of CFO. Sometimes that's a role of controller, depending on the package that they have. But what we're talking about with AI, we're looking at within our own business and also recommending to our clients. Matt Merrill is with me from Topalti. And Matt, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much, Tom, for inviting me today. My name is Matt Merrill. I'm Senior Manager of Partner and Industry Marketing at Topalti. So what that means is I get to work with great partners like Summit Virtual CFO by Anders, but then also with a lot of our ERP ecosystems like QuickBooks, Xero, Sage Intacct, NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics, Acumatica. So you're on it, we cover it, and it's been great to work with companies like Summit Virtual CFO to get access to the companies out there that are looking for automation to solve a lot of problems. So appreciate you inviting us today.
Yeah, thrilled to have you here. So let's jump into the right poll question. Okay. So I've got that poll question launched. So if people will answer that, and then as I close out the poll, I'll wrap back up with you, Matt, and tell you what our answers were. Okay, so you can go ahead with this slide, and I'll let you know when that poll question's done.
Sounds good. All right, anxious to see these answers though.
Yeah.
Always curious where everybody's state of finance fundamentals are, and I think that's what this is about. And I wanted to just put this slide up here and some really interesting statistics. So we're talking about reinforcing finance fundamentals. There's been an interesting journey over the last couple of years in terms of we're in a state of waiting for the pandemic to be over. And then we're in a state of hyper growth and investment in all things technology. Now you're seeing it in AI, especially. Then we're just a year ago, a little bit of a scare with the economy. We have hyperinflation right now. We're trying to figure out, is this a time where we should just be holding pat, or is this a time to invest? And the point that we always see is, if you can reinforce the finance fundamentals and find ways to automate as much as possible and leverage AI for good, then you don't have to make those types of decisions as much, because you should still be able to focus on leveraging the finance function for growth in whatever way that is, whether that's opening up a new office, it's investing in a new product line, it's getting into a new country, things like that. But those things can be really difficult if you're bogged down by manual processes, by supplier onboarding. And I know a lot of your clients leverage you all for a lot of those types of tasks, which can, I'm sure that at the same time, they're also asking you, well, help us grow as well, and help us find, the next location for us and stuff. So I put this statistic up here because I thought it was interesting. We commission a couple of CFO studies every year just to get a pulse on what finance leaders are thinking about. And this study is interesting because we've asked this question now 3 years in a row, and things have changed over the last 3 years. And this year, what led was managing cash flow as the top 3 priorities for CFOs in the next 6 to 12 months. Cost analysis and reduction was next, and then adopting new technologies and digital transformation. So I will say that these orders have changed over the last few years. In more bullish times, I've seen adopting new technologies as the number one, absolutely. And now I think this study was done earlier this year, so there's more focus on really just making sure that cash flow is under control and cost analysis and reduction. Well, my argument, and this is what we're seeing in the market, is that you can take care of all of these by leveraging AI and investing in the right types of technologies. And like you were mentioning earlier, Tom, I know it can be a hot button issue. Maybe from some of the movies in the 80s that had talked about taking, around the time of the Queen song that we heard earlier, kind of changed our thoughts on that. This AI is just a bad word. It's going to take away everything, right? Yeah. Well, what if we can leverage it correctly, so that the smart people on this call that are focusing on growth for their organizations don't have to worry about manual tasks. They know where their cash flow is. They know where costs are because they're handling it with all of their suppliers. And if you leverage the right finance automation and AI, it can help you a lot.
Yeah, I get your point. It is interesting, though, to look at that third bullet, Matt, and say, okay, so adopting new technology sounds like it would not be a finance fundamental. That sounds like the kind of thing that someone would say, well, that's pulling me away from the finance fundamentals. Do you see it? Do you see it that way?
No, good point. And actually, I think in the past, that was probably the case. And I think that actually is something that we've seen over time, where finance, leaders in finance are really focused on being value creators now, not just financial stewards. So I think there was a reputation in the past, maybe also from the 80s, I don't know, with Queen, where it was more, be a bean counter. You're counting the money. How much do we have? How much is going out? Cool, right? Well, over the course of the last 20 years, absolutely, finance is a value driver. And in the organizations that have done the best and performed consistently year over year, have gone through that early stage growth company that maybe started on QuickBooks and Xero, and then they grew and they figured out ways to open up new offices, multiple entities. They figured out a way to leverage the right market abroad. They've stayed ahead of their competition. They found their core market. The ones who have done that the best have been able to leverage the finance function the best to create value. And so I think what's happened is the finance function is getting more and more involved. And we see this here at Tipalti in any financial technology decision that happens. This isn't controlled by IT necessarily. This isn't controlled by your product team. This is controlled by finance, because they're the ones that are going to benefit the most. So you're being asked to pay your bills on time. You're being asked to provide projections. You're being asked to find ways to increase profit and find ways to grow your overall market cap.
Yeah.
Then you should have a say in the investment, the technology that you're investing in.
Makes a lot of sense. Hey, I've closed the poll question. So let's see. Are you able to see those results? Do they
Yeah.
pop up for you?
Okay.
Okay. I'm
This
curious
makes
your
sense to
reaction to
me.
this.
Yeah, so this makes sense to me. And for those who can't see, I'm not sure if you all can see it, but the top two answers were what I'm seeing in the market too. So mostly manual processes and core ERP and accounting system only. And then the third is disparate and disconnected systems. So that makes a lot of sense. And that's what we're seeing out there. And what I think the purpose of working with you all is to just kind of educate the companies that you work with that you're not alone. First of all, that's totally normal to be mostly, let's make sure that we at least just have our ERP in place, right, as we grow. And yes, there are manual tasks, but maybe in the past people are thinking, well, that's just part of business. And it is. There's always manual stuff. Trust me. After this webinar, I'm gonna have a lot of manual things to do the rest of my day. But I found ways also, you know, in marketing, in sales, in product, they've been leveraging AI and leveraging technology for a long time. Think about like marketing automation solutions, or just the platform that set up this webinar that you all sent out. It's crazy to me that it's taking this long for finance to be okay to start looking into beyond just an ERP, but that's where I think it's gotten to. So that's what I focus on here, is making sure, okay, what are the companies that we work with the most? What ERPs are they working with? Well, let's make sure that we integrate there, because we know that that's what they started with, and that this should be a seamless addition to anything that they're already working with. And that's what we aim to do.
Totally makes sense.
So move on to the next question.
Sure. Readiness challenges. Yep. Okay, that has been launched. So where people see the biggest challenges in here, I will be really interested in seeing what answers.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of different ways to look at this, because I think everybody is having similar problems, but there's a lot of different areas of finance automation that we'll get into later on that are kind of overlooked. And so yeah, effective audit strategy, processes. Interesting to see what people say.
Yeah. At the moment, we're almost done. About half are saying the alignment of data and technology. Remember, people can answer more than one in here. Yeah. So that's the biggest. Then trailing behind is technology and processes that will scale, and visibility into key data and transactions. So concerns about fraud and audit aren't very high on those. That's not very surprising to me. Those answers, well, I would have expected.
I think they want to make sure, they think that Summit has definitely got you covered on audit, right? I would hope so. So
oh, I would hope so. Yes,
they're covered on that, so that's great. You all have that advantage. But yeah, aligning technology and processes that will scale. That's the thing that I hear about the most, and we help scaling companies. So what works now might not work, and it typically doesn't, once you add another office in the East Coast, and then one in the Midwest, and then all right, let's start going into Europe. So let's open up an office in London to start. So that can be a big part of it.
Yeah.
So I can go over this next statistic, and this is from a different report from Vantage Research about strengthening the resilience of the finance function. So we do like to, we're not just going to do one survey and report back on it. So we have a couple throughout the year just to hear what everybody is dealing with. But within this is really, again, related to the question that people just answered, but aligning technology with finance can help you avoid adversity. So this is what I was kind of getting at before, where technology was kind of away from that department, and it was kind of controlled elsewhere. Now, if you're expecting finance to be a value driver throughout your organization, you do have to align technology with finance in some way to avoid. And when I talk about avoiding adversity, I think the statistic really covers it. So 78% of finance leaders will take a fresh look at the fundamentals of the finance function in the next year to determine if there are ways to align investment in technology with the goals of finance in order to facilitate growth and to recover quickly from any financial adversity that they might face. So I think that last bit is really important, because in bullish times, it's all about facilitating hyper growth, right? But I think people are a little bit, I won't say jaded, but careful now after everything we've been through over the last, let's say 5 years,
Yeah.
that growth is important no matter what, right? We're a capitalist society. We all work on adding value in our sections of the economy, and we do so by continuing to improve and finding ways to get our goods and services out there to somebody else who finds value in it so that they can do what they do to add value elsewhere and elsewhere. And I think that is consistent no matter what, right? But the one thing is there's a section of that where you have to make sure that, well, let's make sure our mission doesn't, and your mission, whether you're a nonprofit trying to help a specific demographic throughout the world, or an organization with a product or a service that adds value, we don't want it. We've been through a lot of adversity. We've seen a lot of disruption over the last 5 years, but we always know what happens at the end of it. We're tasked with immediate growth, right? We're tasked with immediately figuring out how to figure things out. So there's really no patience for dealing with that, because we all had to deal with it, right? This isn't a micro, disruption in one specific supply chain. These are things that affected all of us. So I think what people are being very careful of is that it's worth looking at ways to align technology fully with finance, so that when there is any type of disruption, business continues as usual. Maybe demand is down slowly. Maybe those growth plans aren't quite as aggressive, but are your financial operations automated, and can your people focus on the right things? That's the idea.
Yeah. And Matter, this is a survey you guys also do annually. Is that right?
We do this annually also. This is a great group called Vantage Research. They're former economist people who I love. I actually used to work at The Economist. And then now they have their own research group that's attached to Newsweek. So I encourage you all to look them out, Vantage Research. And we have a couple of these studies. And I think for anybody attending, we can send out links to the latest versions of each of these if there's interest. Because I think this one specifically talks about software, tech, med tech, retail, e-commerce, and that type of thing as well.
Any insight into what 78% this year looks like compared to last year or other years?
This is way higher. This is way higher.
It is?
So actually last year,
okay.
Yeah, what's really interesting is last year, this was before the inflation scares, before a lot of things over the last year. I think this is more closer to 50 last year, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, It is really interesting to see these things change from year to year. But the reasons change slightly year to year. So like focusing on adversity. But what doesn't change is that every financial leader still is focused on more adding value to the organization than just being a financial steward that counts the money. And they're always finding ways to grow. So the things that can impede it may change from year to year. The things they're worried about may change. Like in times of fast growth for everybody with no adversity, they're worried about keeping up with the competition. So that's a different worry. But the things that can help you in both good times and in bad are strong financial operations, automated across. And again, I think what you talked about earlier with AI, and we have this embedded into our solution, and we can talk about it at the very end. We won't get too much into it right now, but it isn't replacing jobs. It's replacing manual tasks and allowing those smart people who have finance degrees, who are maybe more tasked without a automation solution in place to, track down supplier onboarding, to track down invoices. These are things that not everybody wants to necessarily do, right? But are key to keeping the lights on, or key to keeping the business moving, right? But if you have automation in place, that can help you take a fresh look at the fundamentals, make sure that your technology is aligned, and be prepared for whatever swing we have over the next few years.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I can see a leader wanting to be responsible for that, or wanting to make sure they had a solution in place for that.
Yeah, and just to at least investigate it and make sure that you've exhausted all options. Because I know from talking to you all over the last year, you have a lot of growing companies that you work with, regional companies that want to leverage you all for your financial expertise, right, as they're getting going. But then it's also about making sure that you have your growth goals under wraps and that you've figured out a way to help you all help them succeed as well, right?
Yeah, and it's fairly common that we're recommending technologies to our clients when they come in. They have problems that they're dealing with, and oftentimes as we take over as CFO, clients will have us start doing transactional activities, and usually it's an internal person doing it currently, and we're either helping or replacing what they're doing. It's not very uncommon that we find a home built kind of process that's not very efficient. And often technology is part of that solution to come say, hey, we're big fans of these couple different tools. Why don't you implement this and we'll fix some of these control problems and make it a much more efficient system. And as we're remote, sometimes you're just fixing an issue that was, well, we used to drop it on their desk and then it got done. And we're saying, we don't have a desk you can drop it on. So here's a more automated approach of doing that.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure there's definitely a lot of trust there. So they're looking for you to help them help you get the most out of their financial operations and that sort of thing. Absolutely. Great. So should we move on to the next CP question?
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Your strategy or your okay, that has been launched also. Yes, I'll be curious where sort of in the strategy people are. Is it more on we're investing, we're still looking at it, we're not sure? That'll be interesting to see what people think in this area.
Yeah, as you all are answering this question, I think why we ask this the way that we do and why these answers are there is because I think what we're hearing in these studies and then just out in market and talking to customers. And I go to anybody out there that goes to like QuickBooks Connect or goes to the Zero Show or Sage Transform or Sweet World in a few weeks, look out for us. I'm at all of these shows. I love to hear in market what you're actually dealing with. And in general, I think there's less of a fear that technology could be a bad word, like it's going to, hurt our jobs or something like that necessarily. But there's something to be said about looking at technology over headcount in the question necessarily, because there's always an opportunity to hire a lot to fix a problem. But are you putting a Band-Aid on it, or is this something that is actually going to solve it? So that's always the question. And I think the right type of integrated and consolidated solution can help you enable scale and growth. So I'm interested to see what people are saying.
And I'm going to go ahead and close it now. And I do see it says we said check all that apply, and we only allowed people to answer one question. So I do apologize for the confusion in those directions.
Okay, well just choose the one that leads the most, I guess. So it looks like
that bottom one, we're looking at technology to enable and scale growth is your 45% answer.
All right, well then they're in the right place. That's what we're hearing too, is that with so much uncertainty and again, I keep saying uncertainty, but right now I would just say that based off of maybe the last week was a little bit uncertain. Yesterday was a little bit uncertain. If we're thinking about current events, and that affects things. There's always a trickle down if we're talking about whether the government's going to shut down for a second or pay their bills on time. And then that obviously has economic ramifications. What the Fed chooses to do with interest rates has implications on whether we're in a bullish or bearish market for the companies that we work with. I see it on a regular basis. So focusing instead on, well, let's look and see if technology can help us enable and scale growth makes sense. Yeah, because we've seen so many of these ups and downs for the last few years. All right. So I'll take this in two parts. So I talked about operating with confidence, and that's kind of the point of what we've been talking about this whole time, is having some level of confidence throughout any type of economic situation. And so what we did this study again, and this is back to the CFO Dive report, and they're a great partner of ours, and they've helped us really get third-party unbiased answers. Like, what exactly are CFOs thinking about? What are they
Mm-hmm.
saying? And it really is super interesting. You would think asking the same questions year to year that you're always going to get the same results, but it really does change based off of what's in the news. And I'm curious next year where we are also. But anyways, so almost 4 out of 5, and I think we asked this question earlier, also believe that manual tasks absorb too much of their finances team's time and effort.
Sure.
And I don't know if this probably speaks to you really well,
Oh,
Tom. This is what they're coming to you about, right?
totally. This is one of the big things that we look at. It'd be interesting to look, and I think most of them would say it's probably less than what it was in the past. But I think what we expect is that we should be able to get rid of a lot of these manual tasks. But yeah, a lot of the things that we're doing, we're trying to automate what people do, either from using tools that get rid of the need to do a lot of the manual work, or just automating the activity itself by going and say, okay, this has always been a manual thing. How do you try to automate what we're doing? But just you're using expensive resources to do really manual things, and the manual just more ripe for mistakes that people are making.
Right. And that's, so it's a little bit of a different situation when somebody comes to you and says, clean up all of our manual tasks, versus we have some processes in place or some technology in place, a little bit of automation at least that extends our ERP. We need you to help us, yes, clean up this manual task too and work on our processes, but help us grow. That's a little bit of a different situation.
Yeah.
Which one do you prefer? Probably the second one.
Oh,
No, I'm just
absolutely.
kidding.
The second one. Yeah. Well, and it's lower on your list, but the corporate credit card and spend management is often a low-hanging fruit one for us. Because as we go into smaller companies, usually what we often find is that we started very small, a very high trust environment, and they just have really poor credit card management. People sharing cards, people not doing expense reports, things like that. They don't have a good process for reimbursing people. And there are some solutions that just make that so much easier. And so it's a fairly common thing where we're going saying, okay, now you're 15 people. The common company credit card and everyone just goes and uses it is a terrible idea. And let's get some things in place. And in general, your employees don't like it. Your employees, when they want to get reimbursed, have a very manual process that they don't want to put things on their personal credit card and get it done. And so that's just an example, but there are some really nice tools out there. And I know you're going to talk about what Tipalti offers also. The same kind of things that we've looked and said, we never even thought of this before, but there are some solutions that make things so much better than what we're doing currently.
No, definitely. We'll get into it a little bit later. But the reason we asked the question that we did this year with all of these points is Tipalti covers all of this. So spoiler alert, we do look at finance automation comprehensively, and it's everything from what it takes to onboard a new supplier or vendor globally, to making payments, invoice-based payments, US or globally, but then also capturing all of that department level or employee level spend. That was the missing piece, and that's why we've added that over the last few years. That's having a really easy to use mobile expense solution that integrates into your AP automation solution, making sure that tax compliance is covered, automating payments, that's become standard. But then just what you said, we have about 1,100 employees at Tipalti. You have all these different departments. I work with a lot of them, but you have, people like me that go to a conference on a regular basis. And again, I hope some of the people in the audience, I get to meet you someday at all of these ERP shows. But having a well-dispersed physical or virtual corporate card system that easily integrates into your finance automation platform and then can be synced into your ERP of record is important, because otherwise you have everybody using their own card or sharing a card like you mentioned, and what was this payment for, which department is using this. Can we actually even evaluate that then? Can you evaluate spend by department if you even have that, if they each aren't using their own card?
Right.
But this is one that's kind of overlooked sometimes, and in the past has been kind of on its own. All right, well, we'll set up our own card with one of the normal players that issue credit cards or something like that. But we found that this is something that our clients really wanted was, can you solve this? Is the one missing piece. So yes, I have control over all of our external spend, any PO based type of invoices that we have to pay on a regular basis for our SaaS subscriptions or for this conference that we're sponsoring, or, you know, any marketing expenses, stuff like that. But what about the individual spend under $1,000? But all of that across 1,000 employees starts to add up. You can easily set budget for them. You can keep track of where they're spending it. Are they approved vendors? Stuff like that. And then, like I said, also not looking at PO management or procurement as a separate function than just the overall finance solution. And we have a good, at the end of this, I'll show you just kind of how we look at it as an overall comprehensive wheel. But let's look at all of these 5 things have manual processes in place. If you're doing it without a solution, this takes, I mean, how many people within your group would be tasked with making sure your clients' expenses are figured out, that they're being compliant with taxes, tracking down those individual spends. You know, we already talked about they're probably not doing automated payments in that sense, so that you guys are doing those manually, right?
Yeah. So within our team, you know, as we assign our accountants to clients, usually there's one senior accountant who does this, but I can certainly imagine with larger companies, it gets more manual. You've got multiple people within inside the organization doing it. And sometimes they're actually helping us with some of these pieces, but that's a huge part of putting in automated processes so that you don't have tons of people doing that. And that's one of the early things that we do, is try to automate and come up with better processes so that it doesn't take as much time. So I think you can cut out a huge amount, you know, I think, and I'll go back to the spend management, but usually when we onboard a client, since we're remote, we don't visit them physically. In this case, they wanted a really fast piece and said, "Oh, are you willing to come there?" And so we did. And on the expense manager, it was interesting because I started asking about the company credit card. And they said, "Oh, it's really simple. We have one company credit card that sits in my desk. And if anyone needs to spend things, they just open the desk and get the card number." It was so funny to try to explain to them what a terrible process that was, and just having that trust. And they acknowledged that there are things on the bill that they didn't know that people were going to be buying and things like that. And I said, just all the risks with that, but they couldn't figure out a simpler solution. And we got them onto a credit card application or a platform that they could do expense management, just a much better solution. But it was just a funny reaction of what, of course, they started as a small company that they trusted everyone. And as a finance person, you're coming in saying that is a horrible way. And it's just an example, but we find those kind of things lots of times where really convoluted processes have been built over time that take a lot of people to get work done.
No, you brought up a really great point, though. And I think this is worth it for your audience, too, is that processes need to change over time. Right. So that solution probably did really work at one point. And I remember when I first started Tipalti years ago, we did share one card for a whole department. Right. But it was at least at the department level. So you can start to break it out.
Sure.
And then we come up with our own solution. We use our own card. And now that's really split up into the right departments, the right budget holders. Everybody knows where it's coming from, and you're using only approved vendors. But the important part is that all of that data is able to be captured into one platform. That's the point. That's the biggest thing that I see is otherwise you're stitching together Excel spreadsheets across the entire group. But I want to stress, though, that it's not crazy to start that way, though, right?
It's a good point.
Things change over time, and as you're growing, you need the expertise of partners like your organization, and then the need to leverage unified finance automation solutions becomes greater as the complexity becomes greater. And that's just how it goes.
That's a really fair point, Matt, that a lot of the processes that we think are broken probably did work fairly well at one point. And then I think in many cases, they've just outgrown that usefulness, and someone's not been able to get in and really improve it. Whether that's just not, many people just don't have the time, right? I mean, we're all feeling busy. And so, yes, I know that's broken, but I can't handle it now. And suddenly you've let it go on just way too long.
Well, and then what we talked about before, like the economy changes, right? So what, maybe it did work when you were a 20-person organization, but then we're in a fast growth market and we have to hire, and we're opening up a new office and we're adding new departments and all that. That was actually sales, marketing, everything was kind of combined there. All right, now they're their own separate market or departments with multiple employees, and And then the economy changes again a little bit. Now we're in more of a let's wait and see approach. But I'll tell you that the owners of the company know that one still have aggressive growth goals, right? That doesn't change. No matter what, that doesn't change. There's maybe a little bit of a, okay, we'll adjust the numbers slightly down, but it doesn't mean the goals aren't still there, right? And so having some consistent finance automation in place that does cover all of your company's spend can be extremely important for just consolidated reporting and be able to say, this is what we're doing on a regular basis. And there are no surprises then. It's all in one area to be able to understand it. So I think we have one more poll question, right?
Okay. Yep. Related to growth.
Let's move on. Let's
go and launch that.
I want to learn from this group some more. Let's see what people are saying.
This wasn't launched. Let's see. See if I can get this one's giving me trouble launching. Give me 1 second.
Oh, giving trouble launching. So you can put it in the chat. If not, we'll try to get this one. You did already, everybody have 3 questions. So you're going to get your CP credit no matter what. But I am interested in the answers here.
Oh, here we go. Sorry.
You got the chat. Okay.
I got it.
Yeah. We got it. So what is your growth outlook? What is your growth outlook in the next 6 months? I'm sure this is something you're always asking new clients that you work with, and same thing with us.
And so this would be for the individual. So if we've got people in accounting firms, I would suggest it'd be for your firm, not think of just your clients. If you're industry, it'd be for your company.
Yeah. So answer it the way exactly. Or just in general, how do you feel like your client base is feeling right now?
Okay.
That's a good way to look at it too.
Oh, I would say for many of my clients, they're in the neutral or minor decline over the next 6 months. I've got quite a few clients who their sales pipeline's fairly weak right now, at least in terms of getting people to sign and start work. The pipeline itself is, for many of them, is pretty robust, but no one's signing and saying, let's get going.
I wonder if that is just like what we've been talking about, like a little bit of uncertainty on where we are next.
I think quite a bit of it is. I mean, there's service organizations. We work with digital agencies, and a lot of it is companies who I think are kind of saying, let's wait and see, kind of, are we ready to go? It's not across all of them, but in general, in that industry right now, they had some really good work last year in 2022. And then around the end of the first quarter, things started slowing down for them. And so for right now, the big thing is getting people to sign and actually start the work has been a challenge. And I'm hopeful that as we get into like Q1 next year, that will get fixed, but many of them are much more of kind of a neutral or minor decline.
Well, what we have found, and like I said, I've seen a few of these peaks and valleys over the last few years as Tipalti has grown, is that when our business tends to stay consistent, and we've been consistently growing over time. And it just means that the reasons for investing in automation tend to change, but they tend to come down to getting all of those finance fundamentals under control, automating as much as you can, so that you're prepared for whatever the market ends up being, right? So whenever they're a good time to invest in the fundamentals or to look into an AI-backed solution like Tipalti would be when you're in a neutral growth stage and you're, kind of, battling down the hatches and making sure everything is good in the organization. You're in a stable spot, because what you don't want to happen is, everything changes and inflation. I don't think it's possible. Well, my dad was telling a story about the 80s when inflation, I think, what was the interest rate? Was about like 18% or something like that. Yeah, 18, 20%.
Yes.
And that blew my mind because we're talking about looking at houses out here and 7% seems high. So wow. So that what you don't want to happen is you get into a worst case scenario, that type of state and the finance fundamentals haven't been automated, because then your same staff in a situation where it's going to be hard to hire more people to solve issues are dealing with dated manual processes to try and keep your business afloat. And it's a good time to kind of invest whenever things are paused.
Yeah, you talk about kind of an extreme example from the past, but that is financial adversity. My father-in-law was trying to sell a house during that time in the early 80s. And I remember him mentioning people had trouble getting mortgages. So he offered a mortgage to the buyer at 20% as an incentive to get them to buy
As
the
an
house.
incentive.
And now we're hearing these really low rates. You're like at credit card rates. And that was sort of appealing to say, I'll give you 100,000 toward the purchase and you can just pay me back. I'm like, wow, that was a crazy time. So I'm sure for companies that was really difficult.
This is like back in my economist stage. Like there's a study that needs to be done of, how many of those people held onto those houses versus who had to refinance later on versus what banks own those later on type of thing. I don't know.
Well, let's go ahead and I'll share the results here. So it looks like from our audience is different than what I had said, that you've got the majority are modest growth and others are neutral, but yeah, you can see the result.
So rather than minor, they pick neutral growth and modest growth. And that's actually a little bit more consistent. This actually, by a lot, those two are the ones that are leading. That's what I'm seeing too. It's tepid. It's more of let's look at what we're doing, but the goals are still there. Whoever owns us still needs us to grow, right? So we have to gear up for some level of modest growth. Maybe we readjusted our projections a little bit, but now's a good time to figure out how much can we automate? And this is across the whole organization, but we're talking about finance automation specifically. Where can we leverage AI that can help us continue to grow, even if it's at a modest rate going forward? And then regardless of what changes, we'll be prepared for it, essentially. So go on to key takeaways. So should I tell them a little bit about Topology now?
Yeah, let's do. We've kind of built the case for why would you automate, and give us an idea of what it could look like.
Okay, great. So exactly what Tom was just saying. This is what I mean by looking across the entire finance automation solution. So at Topology, and again, just for some bona fides, we've been around since 2010. We have our money license, our licensed money transmitter license across multiple countries across the globe. And we have a solution that goes from everything from the beginning stages of onboarding a new supplier, which from talking with you, Tom, seems like one of the bigger issues for a lot of the companies that you work with, because it's hard to trust. New companies pop up. You need to work with a vendor abroad. Are they on an OFAC list, a do not pay list, or anything like that? You want to make sure, well, how do you figure that out if you don't have a solution in place that can run them through an engine and make sure they aren't, right? You have to, Google search, whatever. But so that's important. And we have that supplier portal puts the onus on the suppliers themselves to fill out, to upload their W-8s, W-9s, W-8 BENs, make sure that they have all of the right tax ID. So before they're getting paid, they have to get vetted by our engine. And so that same thing with tax compliance, what I just talked about a little bit, a KPMG approved tax engine with 26,000 rules to make sure that, again, everything is compliant. And this takes a lot of the onus off of you all. For procurement, it's PO management. It's being able to provide requisitions, approvals, vendor selection, and the easy solution. That's all, again, all of this is synced back to your ERP. Invoice management. This is where I think the one area that finance automation solutions, or AP automation is the buzzword that everybody says, that's kind of where they stop. Typically it's invoice management. It's just scanning invoice, OCR, being able to approve it. Okay, move on to the payment. But we take that a step further, and we talked about managing that individual purchase level spend at the department level or the individual level. That's with our card solution, both virtual and physical, expenses built into it. And then the big differentiator is, because we have that money transfer license across the globe, is being able to send money to 196 countries and 120 currencies in 6, and now in some cases up to 8 additional payment methods. So the supplier gets to choose, do I want to get paid by PayPal, by check, ACH debit, etc. And then we can help you with finding the right FX conversion rate scenarios, because we have transmit a license across the globe. So I encourage you all to reach out if you are interested in looking this a little bit more for your business, and take some of the onus off of Tom and his team to onboard all these suppliers and check for compliance on everything.
Well, and in reality, what what we would find with our clients, if you don't mind going back to that for a second,
Yeah, let's go back.
if they ask us to do transactional like payments to vendors, and I think a lot of firms that do transactions, we don't provide a full supplier management solution and some of like the compliance kinds of things. We'll pay the bills. And we would usually say,
Got
hey,
it.
that's something you're going to need to do,
Mhm.
but there might be a gap. If you're bringing on new suppliers and not doing any check, you should, but that we won't be doing that for you. This kind of solution is great to be able to say, let me give you a solution as opposed to feeling like I come in and say, you should be adding people. Maybe you hired us in part because we were a more efficient solution. And then if our recommendation is, why don't you hire a vendor manager and why don't you hire this and that, their reaction is probably going to be, yeah, I can see gaps, but you guys are getting pretty expensive when we hire you and then you tell us to get internal people. So a tool doing that could be a really valuable thing.
I'll tell you, especially in today's employment market, investing in a solution like this is more cost effective than just adding headcount.
Oh, I'm sure.
Especially, absolutely. So that I definitely get that. So they're thinking, okay, so you're also telling me I need to hire more people, or I should be the one that's working on all the supplier management.
Yes.
But that's okay. Yeah. So
Yeah, so
that's
it's nice to
we
bring
can
that
take
kind of
that off.
solution. Yeah. Nice to be able to say, okay, you've got this gap, similar to when I mentioned the credit cards and you've got the spend piece. But if that's all broken, to say, hey, you're not doing approvals, budget allocation, you don't have a streamlined process, we can give you a solution that offers all of that. It's this kind of thing you're bringing a solution along with the problem you've identified.
That's why we partner with you all.
Yep.
Exactly. It's a
Yep.
great fit. So I'll just zoom through these last few because I know we're coming to the end, but just to give you, I just want to reiterate that you hear a lot of automation or AI solutions out there, AP automation. And just to get into it a little bit, I didn't really touch on it before, but we have features that we've invested in to leverage AI to make it even better, to where you can then go in and say, did I pay to this vendor before? What were the last 3 invoices to this vendor? Are there any compliance issues? Like a AI-enabled chat feature that's built into our solution, and that's a huge part of it. But then also with any of the OFAC screening or 26,000 rules engine, making sure that whoever you're paying is compliant. Because there's a lot of bad actors out there. We all get spam texts every day, I'm sure, calls.
Sure.
Well, they're doing that to businesses too, right? And what you
Yep.
don't want to be, especially in a growing company that's managing all of your resources as tightly as possible, avoiding fraud is important. But what I wanted to say is we've been around for a long time, since 2010. Actually, we have 3,000 plus customers. And what I wanted to point out about these customer lists, that we're in charge of 43 billion plus in annual transactions for across 4 million payees, is that a lot of these started as very small companies, and many of them still are. But you have your Twitches of the world, and we can handle volume on that level where we're paying all those streamers out whenever they get a donation from anybody who's watching their stream. But they started as a smaller company. But then you also have, for my wedding a couple of years ago, we used Zola for the registry.
Mm-hmm.
Noom is a great app. That's a healthcare weight loss app on a earlier stage. So there's all types, but at every point, each of these fast growing companies that are very familiar, like ClassPass, for example, where we're handling those payments to the vendors that are signed up for ClassPass without you even knowing, because it's white labeled to them. They're able to leverage automation, and that's helped enable them to grow a lot. And then I know we're just at the last few minutes, so I'll just leave this. We have a lot of awards. We're Inc. 5000 for the last 5 years in running, and very well reviewed. So if you want to check us out, that's as well great. There. So I'll pass that back, and I appreciate this, Tom.
Sounds great. Thank you, Matt. And I'm glad you've got your contact information. So you've given us some really good information. If people want to reach out and learn more about the solutions, you got a couple different contacts.
Yep, either reach out to me or Mandy Desky. She works directly with Summit, and she can help you out as well. So thank you very much for including me today. I know you have a couple slides to close things out.
I do, yeah. So a couple more things for our audience before we leave. We encourage people to keep learning. We hope that's why you're here today. And we do have a podcast. Topics similar to what we talked about today, but we'll talk to accounting practitioners. We'll talk to people in sort of the tools area, people who coach and consult with accounting firms. And so I really would encourage people. We have some really good discussions. And Adam Hale, who leads our Summit Virtual CFO by Anders practice, and me, that we're the two facilitators and interviewers in that podcast. If people want to be a little bit more interactive than that, they can join our Slack community. And so we have a CFO community. You've got a free access code to try this out for a month, but you'll see on there that you can ask questions. They're moderated by several people within our firm. And so we hope that that would be a good interactive way. We know a lot of people feel like they're the individual within their company doing this, or there aren't many people trying to do the CFO kind of work. So here's a community for you.
Highly recommend this one, by the way.
Good. I think it's a really good community. Okay,
Yeah,
so
you
if
guys are great.
you heard our role virtual CFO and that is appealing to you, we have a playbook course that teaches everything that we do around how we provide service to our clients. So 15 modules, it's 24 CB credits. So it's a fairly intensive course, but it goes through every single thing that we do, including, and we give out some things like our pricing tools and how we do our marketing, everything. As you finish, you get a free hour of coaching with Adam and I to talk about how you might want to implement this. We also have a once per week fireside chat. So a group of people who are taking this course or who have taken it come in and we talk about how they're doing with that. And they can present challenges. And often it's, hey, how do you guys do this? And we'll bring it up on the screen and walk through and do those things. So I highly encourage it. And then finally, if people look and just say, yeah, that's all really cool, but what we do sounds interesting, we are looking for really good people. And so we'd encourage you to check out the career opportunities that we have available. So with that, we will end. Matt, thank you again. This was really valuable today. And to our audience, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Tom.
everybody.